Hello and welcome to Friday Drinks. As you can tell, our good friend George is not here. He's indisposed at the moment, but doing well. But while he's away, I like to keep his seat warm, guys. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. You're always
Very
welcome,
welcome.
in our bar.
Yeah, it's been an interesting week. But before we get into that, Tinashe, what are we having here?
Okay, it's raining, so I thought
Okay.
I have a herbal tea from
Okay.
a good friend. This is ginger peach, and it has ginger root, hibiscus, and all sorts of things. So yeah, I think it will keep me warm in this weather.
So because of the rain,
Do
you've
you have
changed your
do you
teas.
have some
Yeah.
health concerns that you're trying to allay with this concoction of all these herbs and
Preventative medicine is always better than
ah?
remedial. So yeah,
I see.
one must try to keep healthy.
I hear you. Rufaro, perhaps you've got a version of preventative healthcare.
Yes, thanks
What
to
is it?
Musoni, we have.
Oh, it was his birthday, by the way. Happy
Well,
birthday, Sonny.
Well,
Well,
we're going to
it's been
do
a
to his
pleasure.
birthday.
Yeah.
And we've
And
got
to help.
a
And to
fine
help.
tipple to go with it. The 18-year-old Fiddish, which is one of the better ones. So thank you so much. This is
It's a pleasure, as you know.
it's matured in it's a double cask. It's matured in sherry and bourbon casks, and it's made in small batches of 150 casks.
Thank you, Rufaro. Is there any particular reason that the viewers need to know this information, Rufaro?
I think it's interesting.
Okay.
It's just also I think as you go through your journey as a imbiber of these things, you'll find certain preferences,
Okay.
and the more you know about the whiskey, and you probably have a better understanding of why you like certain brands and styles,
Okay.
and you're much more likely then to have a more pleasurable journey in the world of whiskey. It might be true in the world of tea. I'm not sure. You've got a good sense of what you like and why.
Yeah, I think the only major difference I should highlight is you never get drunk on tea. So
Yes, it's a serious.
I think the D word shouldn't be used on the show. I think more like enlightened would be the word.
Yeah, I don't think that's a feeture of tea
it's
drinking.
not
I
hallucinogen. So
I don't think it's a feature of tea drinking. I think it's a bug. Oh yeah,
So,
there's a
guys-
fun fact. On the box I was reading earlier, they're going to town about where they get the water to make the whiskey, and a lot of whiskey manufacturers like to go on about some spring that they're getting the water. But fun fact, the how smooth and flavorful a whiskey is has absolutely nothing to do with where they're getting the water. It's just marketing.
So you think they could get water from the city of Harare, for example?
Yeah, if they if they filter it and
but
treat it.
Rufaro, if we were to hold that argument to be true, then what's the difference between the different alcohols as long as it's 40%?
So most of the
alcohol
flavor from the whiskey comes from the distillation process and from the wood in which it's matured.
fair enough,
Yeah,
fair
the water doesn't have an impact. Yeah.
Gentlemen, it's been an interesting week. We saw a guy going into his new job with a sink. We've heard about companies switching from the Zim Stock Exchange to the Vic Falls Stock Exchange. What do you make of that?
Look, I think it's interesting, not from the perspective of the individual companies that are making the transition to the Vic Falls. I think it's just in terms of the potential of the Victoria Falls being a special economic zone and a financial hub to rival Joburg or Mauritius. I think that was the vision, that was the thinking when it was founded, but I think that we never actually followed through with creating the legal, the tax, and the financial rules framework to actually make the Vic Falls a semi-autonomous jurisdiction that can compete as a financial hub with these other places. So I think we've fallen short of that vision.
Okay.
But I think,
So why are companies moving?
look, I think the companies are moving because they want to raise money in hard currency, and I suspect it's easier for them to do so on a US dollar denominated exchange. But yeah, so I don't, but it's a very liquid market. Not a lot of trading happens there. Like I'm saying, I don't think it's fallen far
I
short
thought
of its potential.
originally their idea was they can keep their US dollars.
Okay, so if they increase their exports, they get to retain the incremental exports if they listed on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange.
Isn't that a
but
good
that's-
enough
but-
reason? I mean, if central bank is taking 40% of
So
your
that makes sense.
export earnings,
That makes sense for export businesses. But I don't think that, from
and more importantly, is the exchange, the Victoria Falls exchange, is that cannibalizing the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, in your opinion?
so to the,
I'm the moderator, Tinashe. Let's get that right.
Okay.
yeah, so to the extent that you don't have dual listed counters, right? Because there's this taboo in this part of the world of an implied rate that might be different from the official rate. So what you'll find is a company like, not to pick on them, I'm just using them as an example. Padenga migrated from the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange to the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. So there are no Zim dollar trades of Padenga anymore. But in an ideal world, there aren't any good reasons really why it can't be listed on both.
But I don't understand something. So if I drive or if I fly from Harare to Vic Falls, at what point do I go from Zim dollar to purely operating in currency? I still don't get the logic, because we're in the same country, we're in the same legislation, we're in the same geography. At what point does it create the sort of advantage that makes sense? I'm not able to see it. I can see that we've gone from A to B to C, but
Yeah, so this is what I'm saying when I make the case that it's fallen short of its potential, right? Which is, so if you look at the UK, for example, and the Isle of Man, it's still the same country, but the rules in the Isle of Man are different from a tax perspective, from a legal perspective. So you have money that will go to Isle of Man that has no interest in being in London. And the Isle of Man is a successful finance hub in its own right.
But I can tell you one reason why that wouldn't work in Zimbabwe.
Sure.
So the Isle of Man doesn't have the number of tourists that Victoria Falls has. So if you look at tourism, I would suspect that maybe 25 to 30% of our tourism earnings are in Victoria Falls. So if you were to make that jurisdiction and a US dollar jurisdiction, it means that the fiscus and RBZ are not going to get that 30-40% of tourist revenue coming through, and we need that in our fiscus. So I think that's part of the reason why.
are you suggesting that people who are on holiday in Vic Falls go and buy shares in between?
No. What I'm saying is, so his argument is, when you look at the Isle of Man and you look at mainland Ireland in the UK,
Okay.
the reason why that works is because the Isle of Man is just an isle, right? And it's good, it then becomes a tax jurisdiction, right? So that you actually invite capital to go into that jurisdiction, but you're still within the UK.
Sure.
And I'm saying, if we were to have something similar with Victoria Falls, so not just the exchange, but with Victoria Falls, the problem is, therefore, all the earnings, the tourist earnings within Victoria Falls become outside of RBZ and Zimra takings. And I am saying that forms a formidable part of our fiscus and of RBZ's retentions. And I don't think that the present government will be willing to do that.
Yeah, but I think it's a trade-off. I'll push back on that, and I'll make the case that while it's true that you will definitely, if you want to be competitive with places like Mauritius, Seychelles, Isle of Man, that sort of thing, your tax regime means that you're going to lose a lot of tax revenue from the existing tourism business there. But if you succeed on the flip side as a financial center, and you have all the activity from that, you will then have other revenue streams that will compensate for your loss on the
Look, I don't disagree at all, but I'm just saying, I'm making the point that if you want to push your argument, perhaps push your argument by picking up, somewhere where it's been neglected. So Mbire, for example, or Mzarabani, some
Well,
place.
they're drilling oil there now.
Yeah,
but you see,
outside of the oil. But if we say Mbire or we go, somewhere where it's totally neglected,
Okay.
and then you make it an export processing zone, and you say, you know what, this area is pretty much neglected. There's no revenue that's coming from there. I'm just saying it's a better argument because you'll find that people will stream to Mbire if you have those tax incentives and the retention.
Okay, so let's come back to Vic Falls then. So you're saying that Vic Falls does not have the tax incentives that will attract the capital?
No, I'm just saying that right now the fiscus relies on that forex.
And therefore they will not have
They-
an
they
interest
wouldn't-
in...
Yeah, but if you make the case to them that
But
They
who's
will
gonna
find
make-
it very
who's-
difficult.
Who's going to make the case to them?
They will find it very difficult. Whereas if you make wange, for example, you'll find that there will
But
be
Wange's got
a
coal.
way more
but here's
amenable.
the thing about the other hubs that we would potentially be competing with, right? The reason why the Seychelles and Mauritius are so successful also is because people actually want to go there, right? So
Oh,
you're
people
going
do want to go to Vic Falls.
So
surely.
yeah, exactly. People want to go to the Vic Falls. It's a lovely place to visit. So just like people love to go to the Mauritius, it's beautiful there. You go there to do some banking business and spend a few days on the beach, right? So so it actually makes the Victoria Falls more attractive as a potential financial hub because it has the tourist.
I totally agree, but I'm just saying that it doesn't make political sense at the present moment. But if you look at China, when you look at China, the export processing zones didn't start in Shanghai and the big cities. They started in very small, forgotten cities, right? Because it's easier. It's an easier sell. It's an easier
Shenzhen,
political. It's just an easier
So
political
are you
sell.
suggesting we would have rather set up a financial services center in the rural area?
Absolutely.
But who
you know
will go
what?
there?
No,
No,
you don't
he's
need to
right.
go there because
He
all
may
you
be
need
onto
to.
something.
Okay, so all you need it's like the Isle of Man. All you need is just one branch.
Could we do it in Shamva? For
Exactly.
example?
So
Mount
you
Darwin.
could Mount Darwin, right? And then all you have to do is you just set up one branch, right? So you could have a Chinese export import bank. You could have Afrexim Bank. You could have all these different banks with just one branch
Yeah, but would
within
you,
that jurisdiction.
would you
But
capture the world's
level of-
imagination with Shamva or Mbire?
No,
this
because
is
what
the
you're-
Victoria Falls.
No, this is what you're not getting.
That's a
This
good
is-
point.
Okay, so you're absolutely not getting.
Can you
it.
fly directly to these places
No,
like you can
you
at Vic
don't
Falls?
need to. You don't need to. A lot of people who hold accounts in the Isle of Man have never been to the Isle of Man, but you're able to transact, right? So I'm saying if you were to set up in Zishane or in Mbire, some desolate place.
What is it about Mbire you keep talking about? Have
Well,
you
you
been
just
there?
described it as a
Have you
different
been?
place.
Have you been there?
No, I haven't.
I don't
And
think
that's
the
the whole
residents will
point.
find it-
And I'm saying that the Chinese bank, all they need to do is to just set up one branch. That would not cost them more than 50,000, right? But because of that branch, everybody in Zimbabwe will now hold a card, a debit card or a credit card, right? Then they're no longer keeping their money in safes. They keep their
That
money.
is interesting.
And remember, everything
That is
happens
interesting.
online, right? You don't need to go to Mbire.
So do you think
You
we've
don't
got
need.
enough
So
banks
if you
in
wake
Vic
up
Falls?
no. The point I'm trying to make is that is a political hotspot. Victoria Falls is a political hotspot, but for financial services, you don't need to be going to that particular area, right? That's what we've learned. That the
I
Isle of
think
Man,
he's going down a rabbit hole that
Isle
could
of
get
Man,
us
you
into
don't-
trouble.
you don't
But
need
I
to
actually,
go.
so if I was making a pitch to holders of public office around this, I'd say, look, at the end of the day, if you're successful in making Victoria Falls a regional financial hub, you'll actually make much more in government revenue than you're doing now, by orders of magnitude.
I'm saying you're correct, but it's a much harder sell. If you went to if we went to government with two proposals, right?
Mbire and Vic Falls.
Mbire and Vic Falls, I'm more likely to get the license before you do.
Okay, so you'll have the Mbire
Right.
license, he'll have the Vic
The
Falls.
Vic
one.
Falls license,
Okay.
but I'm more likely to have the license. We can try it out. I'm more
But let's
likely
talk
to have
about
the
what we
license.
have for a minute.
And
Tinashe.
I'm saying, once you've set up Mbire, all you just need to do is to just have one street where you have these banks that are there, right? But all their transactions happen. It happens online.
Thank you. It's a good example. Right? Do we
How
have
many
the
people
speed
have
of
been
banks
to
in Vic
Panama?
Falls?
We have banks in Vic Falls. We don't have like a Wall Street equivalent or anything.
So how can it
but you
become
have,
a financial services hub without a single bank?
no, we've got. I think most of the banks are represented there.
Okay.
And all that's missing, and that's the other advantage that Victoria Falls has over a place like Mbire. It's got an international airport. It's got.
You don't need
hotel
to travel.
but you want the travel.
Are you getting a stand for free in Vic Falls?
No, especially.
It's important to just
So
be
there's
clear.
that
I have
also,
no conflict.
that you have people who you have these political heavyweights or godfathers that are so invested in Victoria Falls. So any policy change has to involve so many people.
Gentlemen, we've now gone
Mbire,
down a
so,
rabbit
for
hole.
example, all our gold trades, the minute you have Mbire, you will find that a lot of the gold companies will just set up an office. It's just a structure, really,
So,
in terms of purposes.
Okay,
but the trades would be happening right across the world.
So here's
We
the
all
poll.
agree with Tinashe. Well, not so much agree, but what I think is a good idea in any case is to have a special economic zone with a different set of rules so we can tinker. Because I think one of the reasons why we haven't seen as much reform, as we would like, is because there's concern about things not working and having, unpleasant outcomes. But if you ring fence,
What's an unpleasant outcome?
so if let's say you
changing currency.
But
so hypothetically,
so Vic
an
Falls,
unpleasant outcome is, let's say you announce some policy change that you claim is going to see GDP grow by an extra 5%, and then it fails, and actually we go into a recession, right? That's an unpleasant outcome. But if you're doing it in a small place like Mbire, right, you're saying, okay, fine, we're making this a special economic zone. The rules are going to be different from the rest of the country, and you run an experiment, right?
Are the rules
and
different?
If it works out,
No, suppose.
right? If it works out, fantastic, and maybe you can then try some of those changes in the rest of the country.
That's what
and if
happened
it
in
fails,
China.
it's not a train smash because it's just one small part of the country. It's not affecting
Fair enough.
everybody.
So back to Vic Falls, because we have Vic Falls. Mbire, I'm sure you're going to work on it soon. But we've got Vic Falls. Does it have these features yet?
No, it doesn't. This is the challenge that we
Is this an additional challenge? Because you've mentioned a few challenges already.
because when the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange was announced, that was the aspiration, right? It's going to be a US dollar exchange. It's going to attract foreign capital. People are going to raise hard currency there. But so the exchange was set up and is operating. But what hasn't happened is the change to the legal, tax, and financial regulation framework to make it a special jurisdiction that will attract regional capital. That
So we're going to need to allow for a break. But I'm keen to understand, Tinashe, if you were to choose between the non-existent Mbire Stock Exchange, the Vic Falls Stock Exchange, and the current Zimbabwe
No, special economic zone. Make Mbire a special economic zone.
or Vic Falls
Make
special.
Vic
economic
Falls special economic zone. Which one would
Faro,
you choose?
what
I'll choose Vic Falls 10 times out of 10.
special economic zone?
And I would choose Mbire not for anything, but purely because I understand the politics in Zimbabwe. That Victoria
As you
Falls
know-
is a harder sell.
We don't know what we're talking about, and we need a break. But this issue of Vic Falls Stock Exchange and the Mbire Stock Exchange, or the
Not Mbire.
or the
Mbire special economic
special
zone.
economic. So we're comparing apples and pears here.
No,
But
we're not.
Let's talk about
he's
it
saying,
in the next
He's saying,
episode.
so his argument is let's extend. It shouldn't just be a stock exchange.
I
We
see.
should extend it to become a special economic zone. And I'm saying making Victoria Falls a special economic zone, or even Kariba a special economic zone, why it hasn't happened is because you have a lot of tinkering that you would need to do, a lot of convincing people that you need to do. Whereas making Mbire a special economic zone, no one cares.
We're
about
just having a
Mbire.
discussion. We don't know what
I
we're
suspect
talking
there's some
about.
people who care about it, but anyway, on
Guys,
that note,
guys, on that note,
we'll take a break. We'll be back.
Zvakanaka aiwa zvakanaka aiwa sawiroya kuzorerutsa ndima aiwa ichareruka aiwa pakuvira kwezuva kumira kutumira pakaoma mira pandore kutumira pakaoma zvakanaka aiwa zvakanaka aiwa ndakagara ndakutsa auchamira wega apachina chinokunetsa kana basa wariketsa pachina chinokumutsa kana basa wariketsa zvakanaka aiwa zvakanaka aiwa sawiroya kuzorerusanwe aiwa ichareruka pakuvira kwezuva mira pandorema kutumira pakaoma mira pandorema kutumira pakaoma zvakanaka aiwa zvakanaka.
Welcome back. Guys, we need to decide Mbire or Vic Falls. But before we do that, Rufaro, you've got a penchant for socks these days.
Well, you can't see my socks today, although
How's that?
because I'm wearing boots. But he's wearing an interesting color. Is turquoise?
Absolutely, well done.
Well, somebody's spending a lot of time with you on the colors of socks, aren't they?
They look like schoolboy
learning, I
socks,
think.
though.
Tinashe,
and
would they be schoolboy socks?
These are Ralph Lauren socks.
I would dare say that they couldn't possibly be. This is Tinashe.
Absolutely.
And are you gonna pilot a plane or ride a bike out of here? You know, you've got the jacket for it.
Not even. I think it's chilly out there, and
It's chilly.
yeah, it is. Well,
it
you're
is
drinking
raining.
whiskey, so
Yeah, well,
know,
this is
you're
a very
okay.
generous shot. I think.
There you go.
Well,
in this part of
got
the
to
world,
do
we
the
call them
birthday.
mavuku tots
And of course, you mean this without prejudice.
without prejudice. Anyway, cheers.
Cheers.
Happy birthday.
Cheers. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Msoni.
So, Tinashe, you just said something that just blew me off. Mbire over Vic Falls.
Absolutely. Or maybe let me make the argument. What I'm saying is the only reason, the idea of a Victoria Falls being a special economic zone is nothing new. Since the 80s, we've had those arguments. Even Kariba, it's nothing new. The only reason why it hasn't happened is because politically and economically, it's just a very difficult sell. Like I said, when you look at tourism, revenue from tourism, when you look at the political interest in Victoria Falls, there are lots of people with political interest in Victoria Falls and political and economic interest. So it's just a very difficult sell. It is the easier sell. I agree with you, Rufaro. It is an easier sell, but it's just a difficult sell because of, what I just talked about. But I think that Mbire, because it's been long forgotten, right? Nobody will bat an eyelid if we decide to tomorrow that, you know what, let's actually have a special economic zone and let's have it in Mbire, and we'll start with the financial services sector. So financial services sector, mining sector, and anyone else who wants to come, zero tax, zero everything, you can transfer. And I guarantee you will find all the international banks, certainly the Chinese.
What about the
banks
legislative environment?
Well,
Will it
that's
be-
what you need. The legislation is one simple one. Make Mbire a special economic zone.
So the rules will be different.
So the
So-
rules are different in Mbire.
So where I'm trying to get to
Right.
is, with your hypothesis, this could mean Mbire could fairly quickly beat the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange as a...
Not just the Victoria Falls. I think that Mbire would, the GDP in Mbire, if we do that.
Can
we
I just
come
quickly
there-
check? Are you getting free land in Mbire?
No, but you know,
No, it's
my
important.
ancestors went through, Mbire.
Okay,
So
and that's so
perhaps
cool.
that's,
Okay,
That's-
so
that's-
it wasn't random.
well, it was random.
There's no random that has your totem aligned with the place.
But what I'm trying to say, or what I'm trying to argue, is that it's an easier sell, right? And tomorrow we could start developing Mbire. And all you just need are banks. So, for example, you've got the Afrexim Bank trying to build a center.
They're not trying, they're literally
They're
building it.
literally building a center, yeah. But for all intents and purposes, they could have built that at maybe a fifth of the size that they're trying to build in Mbire. And all you do is to host all the financial services institutions and probably the Chinese. And a lot of people are keeping their money under the mattresses, right?
The National Mattress Bank.
Exactly.
NMB.
And if we think about it, that's, close to $2 billion or so, because we know it's circulating in the economy. And all that circulation could actually happen because you don't need, and I love the argument that you brought earlier on about the Isle of Man. You don't need to go to the Isle of Man to open a bank account with the Isle of Man. So similarly, you don't need to go to Mbire to open a bank account in Mbire. You could open a bank account online, but it's just that your bank is headquartered in
Fair
Mbire.
enough. I think you've made your point.
Yeah.
Let's give
So,
Rufaro
let's
a
hear.
chance because
Okay.
Rufaro, Vic Falls, or
Look,
Mbire.
so I think, Tinashe makes some valid points. And, we should, there's nothing wrong with running that experiment simultaneously with Victoria Falls as an special economic zone. But I think the potential, the upside potential,
Right.
what you could actually achieve in 10 years in Victoria Falls, you can't compare it to some of these places that most people in the world have never heard of. Most people have heard of the Vic Falls, right?
Yes, they
It's the falls are literally one of the eight wonders of the world. So you're not going to struggle to capture people's imagination.
Sure.
And like just to put it into perspective, what I'm talking about in terms of like the addressable market, right? So if you look at Singapore, for example, their financial services sector contributes 70 billion to their GDP, right? So okay, fine. Could we conceivably compete with or become as big as Singapore as a financial hub? Probably not. But we could certainly give Johannesburg or Mauritius or the Seychelles a run for their money. And,
I have a quick question.
yeah.
Why would we use Vic Falls to compete with Joburg and Mauritius? Aren't there a lot of unaddressed countries on the continent?
Yeah, so I think that, if you think about Joburg, it is a financial hub for it is Africa's preeminent financial hub. So most Pan-African businesses will have an office in Johannesburg and will do some banking or financial services in Johannesburg or Mauritius. Vic Falls is also central. It's easier to get to from most places in sub-Saharan Africa than Mauritius. And South
But
Africa.
Rufaro, could I
Yeah.
burst your bubble a bit?
Wait a minute, he didn't best yours. He needs to finish. Let's give him a chance.
No, but he can carry on.
Okay.
Okay, so I need
Burst
to ask
his bubble.
questions.
He asked
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you look at financial services, you don't need to travel. Why would you need to travel? to
You can do it
Victoria
all
Falls?
online.
You can do almost everything online.
So infrastructure is key.
and I'm actually quite surprised for a techie like you to be arguing.
Yeah, so
people flying
when
in and out.
So I agree with you. You can do a lot of banking and transactions online without traveling. But when you look at the services that financial hubs like Mauritius, like Seychelles, like Isle of Man,
like Vic Falls.
they do a lot of. So one of the reasons why people trade there is because of the tax incentives, right? So you need to register a company there. You need to have board meetings. You need to. There's all sorts of other ancillary work that happens that's not necessarily got anything to do with having a bank account and being able to move money around. So because of the tax and legal rules, it makes sense to do a lot of complex corporate finance in that particular jurisdiction. So that's why people actually then go there and do these deals there or consummate them and sign them there.
Then you get into the problem that Sonny was highlighting, because then what is your competitive advantage? Because Joburg, the Seychelles, Mauritius, the Isle of Man
so-
can do that. Because I think your competitive advantage should be, somebody who lives in the DRC should be able to transfer their money. They should be able to open an account and
Yes.
transfer their money everywhere around the world. But now they can do so
Someone
in
in
an
Bujumbura.
African
Yes, absolutely.
jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Because right now what's missing across Africa, across the world, is Africans having to transfer money and do whatever transactions they need to do within an African jurisdiction. Also the Chinese move around with a lot of cash. And part of the problem is because there is no financial services system that is catering for them. And a lot of the other jurisdictions do not want to get into trouble with the international rules, around KYC and things like that,
sure.
which is perfectly fine. And that's why I am, so let's stick with Victoria Falls. The other question I have for you, Rufaro, is can you answer how you will deal with the political godfathers who already have a vested interest in Victoria Falls? And
So
as
I
well
think-
as the
What's their
economic
interest
and
in-
fiscus
Well, I'm not even going to get
implications.
into what the interest may or may not be, but suffice to say that if the city is drawing a lot more visitors, if people are going there and spending a lot more money than they are today, if you have any interest there, you're going to be better off, right? So if you have land and you're and you're developing a resort or apartments or whatever it is, it's going to be worth more if the GDP of the place doubles or quadruples, right? If you've got any interest in that part of the world,
Rufaro,
you're going to be better off.
That argument does not work for Zimbabwe, and you think that it can work for Victoria Falls?
Yeah, and I also want to say something about this. Your focus on the output argument. I think we are at a position where we can only focus on the input arguments because it's clear that the output hasn't happened. We need to figure out what inputs do we need to put in. So I like what you were saying about the legislative environment, converting Vic Falls into a special economic zone, etc. This could make sense. But the idea that the GDP will work backwards, I just don't see it. But
Look, you're not going to see meaningful amounts of money move to Vic Falls in the current legal and tax framework, right? No one's
so
going
Vic
to wire
Falls
money.
needs its own legal
So
framework.
that's why
yeah.
it has to be a special economic zone,
Yeah.
right?
No, I totally agree. I just
So
think that
when-
Mbire offers a much easier and
Path.
straightforward path.
So when they were setting up the Vic Falls Stock Exchange, were there any tax or legal implications that were party to this, apart from just moving the address of the exchange?
Well, look, there was a lot of talk about the aspirations, yeah?
So we
But-
celebrated
but-
aspirations.
Well,
I think it was seen as a first step. So the
of
idea,
how many? Because
but
we need
and
to know
that's
how many
that's
steps.
what I want to argue. That your arguments, Rufaro, it's not like they haven't been argued, right? Victoria Falls Stock Exchange has been there for about 3 years or so, and it was seen as a first step. So I ask you, why hasn't subsequent steps happened?
Yeah, so this is a challenge that we have in our country today with a lot of policy initiatives where we start something with the highest aspirations, like an auction for willing buyers and willing sellers, right? And if we had actually been true to that initial vision, right, we would be so much better off, right? If the auction actually worked the way it was
Envisioned.
envisioned.
But I believe-
and sadly, I think that's the same is true for
Victoria Falls.
Vic Falls, where we had this grand vision of how we're going to make the Vic Falls a financial hub, and we took the first step and we stopped.
And I think it's because precisely of these reasons why Victoria Falls has not happened. I think that Mbire will be a much quicker win.
So I
It's
think
just a rural
I think
council.
we should probably. So who was responsible for setting up the VFX? Was it the ZSC under the aegis of the ministry?
Yeah.
Okay. Perhaps you could help the ministry establish.
Well, look.
Mbire.
So, what would you do if you had a blank piece of paper and you got the concession to make Mbire a special economic zone? What would actually make sense? Because I don't see
A financial hub.
I
So
don't see.
what I would
I don't see
do-
real money moving into Mbire.
But you see it moving into
believe
Vic
you me.
Falls.
Oh,
Yes.
believe you me.
So let's hear your argument.
It's simple, straightforward. If you look at the number of Africans that are keeping cash, right? Because
They just take it to Mbire.
it's just simple and straightforward. That becomes your competitive advantage. A financial sector hub. If you look at the number of Makorokoza who believe in cash, so when you're trading their gold, they do not want to see anything but cash.
The color of your money.
The color of your money. So if you think about it, if you have a jurisdiction where there's some sort of certainty and stability, and people now know that, you know what, as long as it's coming from Mbire, because it's a special economic zone, then I'm getting my money. Then people won't have any problem getting US dollars wired to them. And then you can also then build a lot of, cryptocurrencies, a lot of all these other things that you don't want in your jurisdictions. They can actually happen in Mbire. And I think, if you think about it, there are a lot of Africans from the DRC, Angola, Malawi, Mozambique, who keep US dollars, even Zimbabweans, right? And all they need to know is that there's a jurisdiction. Obviously, it takes time.
Interesting.
Right? To
So
build that confidence.
Could this become a panacea to the FX challenges of the country?
No, it won't.
Okay.
We don't believe in panaceas. Right?
Okay. You don't
Right?
believe in painkillers?
No. Well, we believe. You know what happens when
Yeah.
the strength has waned off.
Oh, you
when you
need
wake
more.
up next
You need
morning,
more.
you see now.
Oh, you need to up. Yeah.
You
Up the
develop so that's not what we're talking about. But what we're saying is there is a competitive advantage. Right now, it's very difficult to move US dollars around for Africans.
This
Specifically
explains this
for
proliferation
Africans.
of money transfer products.
Money transfer, because it's easier to go through a money transfer agency. But even money transfer agency, the reason why they will charge as high as 10% is the regulatory environment and switching currencies and all sorts. And that's what Mbire will address. And I think the Chinese would love it. And I think that
Can I set up a meeting with the Mbire Rural District Council first?
maybe we should go to Mbire and start arguing this argument for them.
I've got a feeling that they
I
will
think
have no idea what you're
You
talking
mentioned
about.
crypto, and it looks like it's making a comeback. I saw somewhere that Pick and Pay in South Africa is now accepting payment in Bitcoin.
Do you consider that to be an endorsement of crypto?
For sure,
No.
it's an endorsement of crypto.
No. Actually, it's a vote against the rand.
Well, that's another way of looking at it. But yeah, I think it's interesting that a country with such stringent exchange control allows people to trade Bitcoin.
This is why they would turn to the blockchain.
Yeah, you know what? Crypto is the future. We can't run away from it. I think it's highly volatile at the moment.
How much crypto do you have?
We're not here to discuss our...
No, because you can't tell us and everybody one thing, and you have absolutely no crypto yourself. It's just
No,
not.
no, I mean,
it's actually
we-
unethical.
we-
Have you got any crypto?
He's not going to
whatsoever?
talk about his personal portfolio.
I'm never going to talk about my personal portfolio. But the idea that crypto is the future, I
Yeah.
mean, you can't deny this. Certain people who are passionate about it. We may not be as passionate as them, but I think that they should be allowed. As a libertarian,
Yeah.
I think that they should be allowed to express themselves.
Can I
in-
just check? Neo-libertarian or just libertarian?
No, libertarian.
Aren't you one of us?
Who's us? Libertarians?
Libertarians.
He's not a...
He's not a libertarian. You're not?
No, I
No.
I am a conservative libertarian. I
not
tend,
a-
I tend to watch when guys like you go ahead, study a little bit, and then I follow through if I see that you haven't hit any potholes.
Okay.
But if you do hit potholes, I can assure you I won't be coming that way.
So I think that, we should allow them to trade. And that's the idea of Mbire, right? That in Mbire, these people who believe in crypto should be allowed to trade and keep their crypto and do whatever they want in Mbire. But I guarantee you will see Mbire changing all of a sudden. And I think that it addresses the question of why people are keeping their money. It's not safe keeping your money under the mattress.
Okay.
Let's be
Wait,
frank
but
about
Fari,
that.
you're onto something.
And we're becoming a cash economy.
Pick and pay.
Yeah.
Can we give them a quarter and then check their numbers on how they perform based on crypto?
Look, I think
Actually, because to my mind, Pick and Pay has just created demand for crypto.
it's a fad. This, people paying in Bitcoin for bread and that sort of thing. I don't think it's going to move the needle in any meaningful way for
Pick and
crypto or Pick and Pay. I think it's just
Maybe not Pick and Pay, but elsewhere. But the idea that you
but it's capturing people's imagination, though.
It's capturing people's imagination.
Yeah.
Did
yeah.
it capture
agree.
yours?
I just found it interesting. I'm not really a big fan of crypto at the moment, but I do agree with Tinashe that
You're a big
it's
fan
the
of cash, I believe.
It's the future. I'm not a fan of cash either. I mean, cash is
He's a fan of
cash
the
is
man you talked about.
We won't talk about it. The man with the sink.
Yeah.
cash, especially in this part of the world. But
Yeah.
even if you're holding US dollar cash, right? So official US dollar inflation is what, 8.5%. So in the last 12 months, you've lost 8.5% of your value. Now, and so it doesn't actually make sense to hold for the long term any monetary asset. You're much better off stocking bottles of Glenfiddich.
Okay.
Or gold.
Yeah, he's a gold bug.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of gold, but yeah, I will say that gold is better than any fiat currency. Although I would, over the last 60 years since it's been around, the S&P 500 has actually outperformed gold.
No, it should. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an investment, right?
All
Gold
right,
is not an
all right,
investment.
guys. I think we're running out of time. So before we go to powder our nose, I just understood something from you, Rufaro. Crypto, because Pick and Pay is starting to look at it, could become interesting.
Yeah, it's the future for sure.
Okay, Tinashe, you were talking about Mbire, and let's not talk about Mbire, but you were actually talking about you can't have an exchange without the SEZ, without the legislation, etc. So our VFX story is half the solution because we're going to need VIC4s to join an economic zone.
Yeah, it's half the story for sure. It's less than half the story. I think we've
story.
we've taken the first step.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Of 100 steps that need to be
Sure.
taken.
Friends, this is what it's like when you're herding cats. Let's talk again in the next.
Sawira huya timborangana timboronga tichine mkana andirambe ishe ninobvuma kana mati yangu nguva yakwana sawira huya timborangana timboronga tichine mkana daita isiva ramangwana taingovunza ndewani mukana dainda isiva ramangwana taingovunza nderani jana sawira uya timborangana timboronga tichine mkana sawira uya timborangana timboronga tichine mkana daita isiva ramangwana taingovunza ndewani mukana dainda isiva ramangwana taingovunza nderani jana sawira uya timborangana timboronga tichine mkana.
So now that we've finished herding cats, I'd like to know what these cats think about the man who went to work with the sink. What would you do on your first job in a
first
company
day
that you just bought?
at
First
Twitter.
day, yeah. What would you do?
Actually, I think it's a remarkable story. Just the whole drama of it from day one. Like, first he announced he was going to buy it. There was outrage. People, this thing is too important to be owned by one man. Blah blah blah. And then he had a fight with the board about the numbers. And then they
The number of
took him to
lots.
court
Yeah.
to force him to buy it.
Yes.
And then he was the bad guy for fighting back. And then eventually he's taken it over, and there's more outrage. It's been quite a circus. I've been following it quite closely. It's quite entertaining.
So is it about the business or it's about the entrepreneur?
So look, I think the entrepreneur and the business. Because if
But it can't be both.
because he could have built.
Or maybe let me ask it in another way, because I think Devonson is onto something. Because
Sure.
And I think you're the right person to answer this, because you follow Elon longer than, well, you're more passionate about Elon than anyone else I know. He's been successful at a lot of businesses. Is there a guarantee that he can be successful at Twitter? Stephen King has come out and said, you know what, I own a Tesla. I think it's a fantastic car. I think it's brilliant. I think what Elon did with the Tesla is just phenomenal. But I think that Twitter, he's going to get it wrong. What are your views?
So I think that's a fantastic question, and I think that if you look at all,
His first sentence confirms that he's a fan.
Absolutely.
if you look at the history of great entrepreneurs, right, and somebody who comes to mind is Steve Jobs, right? He founded Apple. He was phenomenal, but he got fired, right? In 1987, and I think if you just
And went on to start Pixar and
yes, yeah, but the point I was trying to make, maybe Steve Jobs is not a great example for this, but the point I want to make is that even great entrepreneurs have been known to do stupid things, to get things horribly wrong sometimes and lose a lot of value.
I think great entrepreneurs have to do stupid things.
So and I suppose it's part of it's part of their nature, because if you think about any great business that's been built, at the time it was conceived, most reasonable analysts would have said that's a horrible idea. It's going to fail miserably, right? And only in hindsight do we, do we say, "Oh wow, that was a brilliant move by this entrepreneur," right? So, yeah. So there's no guarantee.
So
that
you think this is?
I don't think.
one
I'm not
such
saying
moment.
I don't
That
think.
only years later we're going to look back and think he was a genius.
Or he got
that
it horribly wrong. Yes,
Okay.
I
So
don't
the
think.
jury is still out.
Yeah, the jury's
But
still out.
is this a quintessential Elon move? What he has done so far? You studied the man. Do you think that this is in line with what we know of his business acumen so far?
Yeah, so that's it's his nature to if you look at the projects that he's started, it's always been almost on a whim. He's been bothered by something like
SpaceX,
like if you look at the Boring Company, he was stuck in LA traffic and he was pulling his hair out, and he tweeted that I'm going to start building tunnels, and that's how and the next thing he's founded this Boring Company, right? So, and I think funny enough, one of the reasons why he ended up deciding to buy Twitter is there's a small group of comedians, satirists that run a blog called the Babylon Bee.
Yeah.
And they had a Twitter account, and they used to post a lot of their jokes.
Funny, conservative, satirical stuff.
Babylon Bee. And then they made a joke in the transgender space that somebody at Twitter didn't like, felt violated the rules.
They called a man a man and a woman a woman.
Oh. Well, I guess you neoliberals will understand those kind of jokes.
And they got banned, and and he was outraged, and then somebody suggested maybe you should buy this thing.
I think it's more than just that.
No, and then he said how much?
I think that what tends to happen with Elon is, if you look at PayPal, the PayPal mafia and Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, the idea of Facebook. If you look at LinkedIn, so Peter Thiel was with Facebook. LinkedIn was with what's his name?
Hoffman Reed.
YouTube. So a lot of the social media are part of the PayPal mafia. This is a background that people don't realize.
But every successful community breeds more of its own.
No, the point I'm trying to make is he's very familiar with
that
the
crowd.
workings of social media. So it's not necessarily true that it's because of what happened to Babylon Bee.
Okay.
That could have been a trigger, and knowing Elon, that would have just really excited him. But I think that he's so familiar with social media and how social media actually started, because
he knows a lot of the key players.
He knows a lot of the key players. He knows exactly what needs to happen. He knows, and I think the thing that he's got right, which was a bug, which he has made a feature, is how do you monetize this elite group or this elite association of blue tick?
Oh, jeez.
Exactly.
I mean,
they've created. You know what?
Are you serious?
Oh yeah, I think he's made it into a feature, right? It used to be a bug because you know what?
It was arbitrary and it was elitist, and only certain people could get a blue tick.
But I'll tell you what I understood.
You know what I reckon happened?
This is a leveraged buy, so he needs to pay that money back and keep his equity.
No, whatever the reason. But I think he went in and he's like, how many people have been rejected a blue tick?
Oh, so many.
And he's like, so are you telling me that all these people want a blue tick,
You're not giving.
but you're not giving them.
So he saw demand.
So exactly, it's just simple, straightforward. If there are tons of people who want it, then those
Give
in
it to
the inner
them.
group just give it to them and just monetize. But the thing that people are missing is imagine a business. Imagine if you are a big business or even Tesla or whoever. How much would you pay where you can now curate your content?
No, just hold on. Did you get your blue tick?
No, I haven't, but I'm going to pay for it. Well, Friday Drinks will pay for it.
Well, I for sure am going to have a blue tick if it's available.
Absolutely.
Well, it's $96 a year. I think you can afford it.
But it's not just that. If you're a content creator, you just realize just how important it is because it comes with a number of things, a number of features
But doesn't
that you'll
that-
be able to.
But doesn't that
And-
create a red ocean? Because suddenly, if anybody can pay $8, then what's the value?
Not just that. Because remember, when you look at Instagram, what influencers are able to do on Instagram, right? And the videos are getting longer, is that they can curate videos which are easier to watch on Instagram than they are if you go onto the internet.
Okay.
Right? Now, the thing about Twitter is you've got a number of very intellectual, market analysts or journalists or whatever it is who are curating information. And right now you do it as a thread. If any of you have actually tried to do a thread, you just know just how difficult
It's
it
tedious.
is. It's tedious. It's just not.
Well, you are in the
user-friendly.
threads business.
Exactly. But what this will do is you're able to do a whole lot, like involve a lot of media and attract a lot more people.
Okay.
So if you're a blue tick, or according to what we hear, is you can actually curate your content. And I think that means that we'll be able to monetize Twitter.
Okay.
And I think
And will
that's an
Twitter be
exciting
able
bit.
to monetize Twitter?
Well, obviously, because they're charging me, right? So now I start thinking, okay, so I need to charge people who are looking at my content. But how do I get them to charge?
So anyway,
How do I get them to pay?
You said something quite interesting about this buy being leveraged, and it just
He's got to pay that money back.
he's got to pay that money back. And I think there's an interesting way of looking at this transaction that hasn't gotten a lot of coverage, which is the fact that Elon's other business, Tesla, is a 700 billion market cap company that sells, at the moment they're on a run rate of about 1.5 million vehicles a year. They sell every car that they produce with zero advertising spend, right? Now, coincidentally, Elon has more than 100 followers on Twitter. He's the third most followed person on that platform after Obama and Justin Bieber, right? So so what do you think the marketing value of 100 million followers on Twitter is worth to Tesla? Maybe it's already paid for itself.
Absolutely.
And if he actually makes it turn around and profitable, that's just a bonus.
So you would suggest he's already made his money.
He's already made his money.
So, okay, let's assume that you're right.
I agree.
Let's assume you're right. Would going to work with the sink be the right thing to do on the first day?
No, that
What
was
would you
hilarious.
do?
That was
He's got a
hilarious.
great sense of humor. I know that's hilarious.
Let it sink in.
But anyway, he had an interesting thread on Twitter. On
Lupita.
Lupita. Yeah.
Why?
I think you had...
She's from East Africa.
Yes. But
Oh, is that true?
so why were you so passionate
I
about
think that, you had the walk, going apoplectic about Lupita becoming
Brand
a
ambassador,
brand
for
ambassador
De
for
Beers.
De Beers. And this is, the argument is De Beers is somewhat entangled with colonialism and the plunder of diamonds in Africa.
Well,
And
it
she
would be
shouldn't
hard to say it
associated.
wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. But, show
But
me
it's
a saint.
2022.
This is 2022,
Fair
and De
enough.
Beers, they take their social responsibility quite seriously. If you think about the number of people that they employ, the tax revenue that governments actually enjoy, and also the fact that when you look at De Beers and you look at diamonds are not just the shiny stuff, shiny stones that you give to your wives, and jewelry. That is, but
girlfriends.
there's a lot of industrial. There are lots of industrial services and processes where diamonds are actually used. So you find that a lot of people actually are paying De Beers, right? And they've made a handsome bunch from our money. Why shouldn't Lupita get paid?
Do you know how much she got paid?
Well, whatever it is, I'm sure
It's good money. But
extremely good money.
you see,
And she's showcasing. I mean, if it was Charisse Theron, everybody didn't have a problem with that. But certainly because
Was she a brand ambassador for De Beers?
I think at some point she was.
no. Lupita's the first brand ambassador. But I just find it, it boggles my mind that anybody would have a problem with her being the brand ambassador, because does anybody have a problem with De Beers today?
Is this part of your neoliberal thinking?
Not even.
Because I see that you
But
guys are in
the
agreement
reality.
right now.
It's a
I mean,
reality.
if you think about Botswana, for example, in South Africa, in Botswana. It's the biggest company in the country. It's the biggest exporter. It's the
Export
biggest
revenue.
taxpayer.
Employer.
Everything.
Right? It's in a 50-50 partnership with De Beers. It's benefiting millions of people.
The Botswanan
right?
government
So-
owns 15% of De Beers International.
Yeah. So what is wrong with De Beers today? Like, whatever they did 200 years ago, and please name
However
a company
atrocious.
that 150 years ago or 100 years ago was not
question.
participating in
Do
things
you
that were
think-
colonial or racist or whatever.
Do you think if we had brought De Beers to Chiadzwa, we would be better off, or we'd be where we are, or we'd be worse off?
Well, remember, they actually sold.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
So I guess
They made a
something.
bet that Zimbabwe was not. In fact, the interesting bit, this was in the 70s, I think. They did, so they knew there was diamonds.
Yeah.
There were diamonds in Chiadzwa and in Botswana.
Yeah.
And the decision was based on which country is a better country to trade in.
And it depends on the regulators they were dealing with.
Exactly. And at that time, this was in the 70s, which is interesting, is they bet
On Botswana.
what was on
Because there
Botswana
was war in
and
this
on Zim.
country.
And it turns out they were right.
And there was war in this country.
Well, not just that, but it was about, because remember what they did is they owned the assets for a very long time. So, and they own a lot of these resources, and they'll only mine them maybe in 50, 100 years' time. So it doesn't matter what the political situation is. As long as they own the asset, then they're safe. And remember, they've owned the assets since the 70s. They only sold it in 2006, which is interesting, to ACR.
Okay.
If you remember, what's his name? Cranswick.
Yeah.
Yeah, they sold it to Cranswick only in 2006. Before that, they actually held the asset. So, but in the 70s, it was a decision whether to mine Botswana or to mine Chiadzwa. And they thought, you know what, let's bet on Botswana. Turns out they were right. I mean, they invest in quite a lot. Well, Anglo then invested quite a lot in scenario planning. It turns out they were right.
So look, you've got to give the Oppenheimers credit. They, as strategic thinkers, if you look at the history of Anglo-American and De Beers, they've, for the most part, got it right. And they've created a massive fortune.
So, Lupita, where does she come into this, 150-year story?
Well, I think,
Is she helping them revive their image?
No, not at all.
So what's the
she's
purpose?
looking at? I mean, she's going to help a lot of girls out there, but I also think that as a brand ambassador, she's just really iconic. She's wearing African hair, and her skin
Does she
just
have
looks
hair?
lovely.
The last time I checked, she really didn't have much hair.
She had a natural hair. I think that's the problem. You see, this is what we need to decolonize.
No, we're saying
His
that.
mind, his mind.
Look, you can't talk
she's
to me
got
about
natural.
you've got hair. I have no hair.
Yeah.
She
Maybe
hardly
that's
had
the
hair.
problem. Maybe
You
that's
should.
the problem.
Well, when I met you, you had no hair. So
You thought I didn't have
yeah,
hair.
well, yes. Well, I you thought I don't have hair, but what I'm
Or
saying,
do you have hair?
I do. But here's the thing:
Yeah.
the Lupita story for me, is it about the history of De Beers, or is it about the future of De Beers? Because I'm understanding that Lupita may be coming into the future.
Exactly. I think that's a very succinct and lovely way of looking at it.
No, don't agree with me
that
because
does Lupita come in and look at the past, or she looks at the future? And looking at the future, they are going to do a lot of work around girls, in
Emancipating
Africa,
women.
emancipating women in Africa, and I think that
I mean,
is
like,
the way you're looking at it. That's the beautiful.
I
way
shudder to
of
imagine
looking
what
at it.
kind of mind sees the appointment of Lupita as a celebration of all the nasty things that happened 100 years ago. Like,
a woke mind.
Oh, well, please describe that more closely so we can all appreciate that.
Those who are given to cancel culture.
You know.
Okay.
Because
Well, Elon described
their
it quite well.
feelings.
He says it's a mind virus, wokeism.
Okay.
And I suspect that the people who are outraged with Lupita's appointment are infected with this virus.
Do you see Lupita being appointed a brand ambassador for Twitter?
Well,
Do they
That'll
need
be
one?
nice. That'll be a good
stranger
one.
things have happened.
Especially with Elon.
The one thing I must say that I appreciate about Elon is
When
that,
Trump might come back, eh?
Yeah,
On
Trump
Twitter.
might
well,
come
he's
back.
back on Twitter already.
No, he's not.
No,
not yet.
Not yet.
But they said on Monday.
No. It says only after
There's
the
a
midterms.
process, but he's going to be back.
Only after the midterms. That's when they're going to set the
So
process
they're
back.
beginning to use Twitter already as a midterm tool.
No, only after midterms are they going to get people to come back.
So the midterm, just for the benefit of our viewers, is the congressional election in the US.
House.
But even though
next
you've
week,
said congressional election next week, etc., do you think, well, perhaps your average viewer will understand, but
They're savvy enough.
ladies and gentlemen, it's been good fun being with you, being with these two cats.
Yes,
Difficult herding
minus
them.
George.
Minus George. We'll look forward to
Lots
seeing
of
you
rabbit
soon,
holes.
George. Heaps of rabbit holes, but I think we got the picture. VFX and Mbire are equivalent. We just need to establish how to build a story around that. We're looking forward to see Lupita as the brand ambassador for De Beers. And we're all liberals, and therefore we couldn't be bothered about the past. We're looking to the future. Having said all that, if you can't be good at it.
Cheers.